Hello, everybody at home. Thanks for tuning in to our weekly poetry series. I'm Nicole, the manager at It Again Bookstore, and I'm joined today by poets Luisa Muradyan and Julia Kolchinsky Dasbach with their latest books, American Radiance and The Many Names for Mother. They'll be pictured below later. If you like what you hear over the next hour, we encourage you to buy their books from us at Read It Again and to ask questions or leave comments. I believe both of you are also involved in other virtual poetry events this week. Do you want to talk about any of those to plug them? I think the Oh Miami Poetry Festival is on Tuesday, and the Words Together, Worlds Apart is that every Wednesday?
Yep.
Yeah, so you guys should, if you like poetry, people watching, you should tune into those as well on Tuesday and Wednesday. So the way the formatting is going to work, each poet will read and then we'll have a discussion. Tonight's topic centering probably around the mother-writing dynamic, which is maybe something that a lot of people working from home right now can relate to. Okay, so Luisa is going to read first. And Luisa Muradyan is originally from the Ukraine and has a Ph.D. in poetry from the University of Houston, where she was the recipient of an Imprint Jesse H. and Mary Gibbs Jones Fellowship and a College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Dissertation Fellowship. She is the author of American Radiance and was the editor-in-chief of Gulf Coast, a journal of literature and fine arts from 2016 to 2018. She was also the recipient of the 2017 Prairie Schooner Book Prize and the 2016 Donald Bartholomew Prize in Poetry. Additionally, she's a member of the Chapbook Collective, a group of women and non-binary writers from the former Soviet Union. Previous poems have appeared in Poetry International, the Los Angeles Review, West Branch Blackbird, and Ninth Letter, among others. You can also find her on Twitter at Luisa Muradyan. So Kim's going to make you big, and then you can read.
Great. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Read It Again Bookstore. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Julia. And thank you, viewers at home. Katie, I see you there, girl. So I'm going to start. When we kind of came up with the topic, I was like, okay, I have to read all my, hi, Elizabeth. Okay, I have to read all of my poems about motherhood. And then I was like, well, do I have poems about motherhood? And then I was like, every poem is about motherhood. So there was a lot, like, this is just me taking you through the journey of my psychosis. But I thought I would start with a newer poem that's not published yet. It's coming out in Threepenny Review in, next year, I think. But it's about my mom. And so how I connect to motherhood really is centrally focused on sort of her and having her as my, role model in so many ways. So my mother as Tom Cruise, or as every other late 80s action hero. My mother successfully jumping off of a skyscraper onto another skyscraper. My mother hunting the predator with a cigar lodged in her mouth. My mother saying son of a bitch in the coolest way imaginable. My mother ripping a mask off to reveal she is not, in fact, the president of the United States, but that she is, in fact, my mother. My mother somehow knowing how to pilot a helicopter. My mother pulling her abusive father out of a bathtub. My mother slamming her fist down on the table during an arm wrestling tournament. My mother registering her hands as lethal weapons. My mother pleading with her mother to leave before things got dangerous. My mother watching things get dangerous. My mother holding the green wire and the blue wire and figuring out which wire to cut. My mother covered in her mother's blood. My mother, my God, my mother, walking away from a burning car. My mother, an action hero that self-destructs, and yet she's still my mother sitting in front of a villain, calmly explaining to him that death is almost here, without sharks, without bombs. My mother, pale as the moonlight. My mother, watching him die slowly, in explosive peace and immeasurable quiet. So the next poem I wrote a while ago, and this one's out of American Radiance. Woohoo! And this one, like, I feel like we're in this sort of bizarre time where, most of us are at home and thinking about the world outside and what's going on. And all these sort of things. And, you know, I'm seeing more and more like apocalyptic type things getting published. And this was sort of where my head was at. I was like, if we could reset and restart it all again, what would it be like? So this one is in the book, New Eden. You know the movie where cell phones become sentient and mankind is enslaved through a series of poorly closed gates and missed phone calls? The one where it all somehow comes down to a cowboy named Freedom Rings propelling in slow motion toward an important red button. The one that ends with a new dawn and a new age for humans. We should, of course, burn it all and start again. If we forget about trousers and t-shirts, we can reinvent them. We can reemerge from our caves and find a new way to touch one another. Let me hold your ear. Let me kiss your ankle. Let me press my face against the side of your back and make a farty suction noise as a way to say hello. And repeat this action against the armpit as a way to say goodbye. And because of this, we will rarely say goodbye. We will stand across from each other, arms up and pantless. We will stand in our nakedness in awe of our new Eden. But this time, we will throw away the fig leaves and cover ourselves in bubble wrap, spending long evenings popping each other's cloaks by candlelight, ashamed again at our magnificence, terrified of our knowledge. And when it will be time to express adoration, we will use the words borrowed from our ancestors, whose broken records we found in the rubble, holding each other among shattered bricks and electronic fossils. We'll whisper the new way to say, I love you. Doo-wop, doo-wop. Shoo-bop, shoo-bop. So again, thinking about motherhood, both my kids go to bed right now. It is like the perfect storm. And so if you hear like explosions or just absolute insanity somewhere else in the house, it's probably fine. My husband is on it, maybe. So, you know, in honor of him, probably sitting among explosion, I'm going to read a poem that like one of like 3 poems I've ever written for my husband, called Marriage. Marriage is a lifelong commitment to buy groceries for another person. Each week, I buy you 7 plums because they are your morning ritual. Every once in a while, you bring home a bag of persimmons and I slowly undress them by the sink. We have not yet figured out the right way to eat a pomegranate, though the last time we were in Jerusalem, someone told me it was the forbidden fruit and not the apple, which I am ashamed to admit I almost never wash. I am unclean in many ways, like the ham and cheese Lunchable I hid from my grandmother, or the turkey bacon that remarkably tastes like bacon because maybe it is bacon. There is honesty in the oatmeal, but not the Greek yogurt that was never actually eaten by the Greeks, though the words of Aristotle are printed on the side. We are what we repeatedly do. You repeatedly standing in front of the milk, me repeatedly staring in the barbecue aisle. There are love poems everywhere. But here in this breakfast pastry aisle, I hand you a box of Pop-Tarts and say, put this in my toaster. And you know exactly what I mean. And since Katie is here, hey girl, I am gonna read a poem that I know Katie is a fan of. So this is Katie, this one's for you. Boris. There is an old can of tuna in my refrigerator, and I don't have the heart to throw it away. So I give it a name. I call it Boris. And sometimes I think about Boris when I eat a ham sandwich, or when I frost a cake in lily white, or when I wash the dishes. When I have guests over, I worry that they will smell Boris. And how can I explain why I won't throw him away? But he's in there, next to the eggs. And I imagine the refrigerator alive in the twilight, and Boris pulling back his mouth and singing to the fresh tuna, and how the young don't believe in the old. Okay, I'm gonna read 2 more from the book, and then maybe I'll end on 1 or 2 other sort of new ones that are not in the book. So this one, I feel like we need, yeah, okay. I'm not going to do an intro because I am bad at them. Clams. You say don't use words like sad in poetry, but I am as sad as a sad cloud crying at a sad cloud convention. If sadness were a fruit, it would be a sadberry, which is related to the blueberry, but sadder. And if sad were a type of dinosaur, it would be all dinosaurs because the Sadosaurus Rex and all his friends are dead. And when you go to a sadness party in your mock turtleneck, it's really just an old man watching the finale of The Bachelor by himself. And when I say watching the finale of The Bachelor, I mean you're in an alleyway watching feral cats fight over an empty box of pizza. Or maybe I've gotten it wrong. And when I say a phrase like, I'm sad, I have no idea what that means, because abstraction is the failure of language. But wouldn't it be great if when I say I'm as happy as a clam, there really is something beyond a bivalve mollusk burying his body in the sediment? The day at the beach, when we dug up so many clams they ate through the plastic bag and spilled across the sand like pebbles. Okay, let's do, okay. I'm going to end out of the book on a prayer. Schwarzenegger in prayer. There's a scene in Predator where Arnold Schwarzenegger slaps the hand of Carl Weathers and the camera focuses for a moment on the flecks of their palms. And I think this is how prayer works. Two tulips brush against each other in the rain. And when I watch action movies, I believe there is a reason Bruce Willis can jump out of a helicopter and propel into a circus tent, that perhaps yippee-ki-yay is really another way to say Baruch Atah Adonai, that perhaps the chopper is a temple, and when he says get to the chopper, this is a call to return or just a call to stand in the garden and marvel at the beauty of wet flowers. Okay. So again, trying to pull from my newer work that is also sort of centering on motherhood, or at least thinking about motherhood. So these are the other two that I sort of found that I thought might be thematically appropriate. Violet Lace. My son has not been the same since a bird he has loved for weeks ran headfirst into the window. He points each morning at the point of collision. He does not yet understand death, and neither do I. The orca carried her dead calf for 17 days during the war. My grandmother carried her dead child inside her body, delivered and dressed it in the only beautiful thing she could find in the basement. Mother Tongue. This poem is sort of about, and I'm curious what Julia thinks, has had this more similar experience where, if you grew up speaking a different language, I grew up speaking Russian, but then you immigrated and, you went through this like extreme overabundance of learning English and needing to learn English, as a child going to school, now being in a position where you have your own children and you desperately do want them to speak your mother tongue. And then you find like your own inadequacies in the language you're supposed to know, sort of clashing with, other problems you might even have with English. So this was sort of my approach, writing out some of those struggles that I've been having. Mother tongue. I do my best to teach my son how to speak my mother tongue. When he points to his nose, I say nose and also nos. My own yazik is damaged, constantly apologizing when I try to tell my mother how much I miss her and conjugate the wrong emotion. I am sorry for the part of me that no longer exists. I am ashamed how easy this language was for me to learn, how easy to forget my mother's Yiddish. The nights I stayed up memorizing words to beat the boy who pretended he could not understand me when I asked him to pass the paper in class. My mother weeping with pride when I stood in front of the elementary school and spelled business, my first word, and asphyxiation for my last. And then I will read one last poem that is sort of a way to welcome Julia and her time. Julia and I, both have young kids, and we're sort of grappling with having very young children, during the pandemic when, most of us are quarantined and can't go anywhere, and trying to explain to, toddlers and young children why they can't go play with their friends, why they can't, run up and give hugs, why they can't see grandparents, and all these sort of things. And so we've started like writing letters to each other, like, dear Julia, dear Luisa. And it's been kind of lovely to be able to come to the page and to each other and just sort of like, have a moment. So I'm just going to read one of mine to Julia. Dear Julia, my son tells me in his sudden bursts of joy, Mommy, I love you. And I scream, yes, I love you too. Mommy, I love apples. And I say, yes, dear, that's lovely. Mommy, I love Daddy. And I say, yes, Daddy loves you so much. Mommy, I love my socks. And I say, well, yes, they keep your feet warm. Mommy, I love pooping. And I say, oh, okay. Mommy, I love looking at my poop. And I say, please flush the toilet. Mommy, I love the moon. And I think, yes, a poet. Like when he calls pistachios pea statues, or how he tells me we love all of the people we love. And I try to hold these words in my chest, let the innocence wash over me, a body that has seen too much, a body full of joy and terror, held together by anxiety and bad jokes. Julia, it is often my anxiety that gets me out of bed every morning and puts my pants on. Today, my anxiety has chosen the gray velour and walks me into the kitchen to crack the eggs. I remember my grandmother talking about bursting with passion and my grandfather, who was a professional boxer, erupting in violence. They called him the Odessa volcano, and he would often talk about his sexual exploits. And Julia, none of it seemed strange until my grandmother revealed her lifetime of lovers. And here I watch a dandelion become white and weightless, torn apart by a gentle breeze. All right, that's my time. Thank you, everyone.
That was great. Thank you. I don't think I've ever heard doo wop read with such gravity before.
I have extreme anxiety reading that out loud because it's like on the page, it's like, whatever. But when you have to say it out loud to people, it's a process. Also, my quoting Schwarzenegger in poetry, I have to practice.
I love that. It was great. But yeah, a body held together by anxiety and bad jokes. That was a really good line.
Same one.
Me too. Okay, so now Julia is going to read for us. And Julia came to the United States as a Jewish refugee in 1993, also from the Ukraine, and grew up in Maryland. She has an MFA in poetry from the University of Oregon and is working towards a Ph.D. in comparative literature and literary theory at the University of Pennsylvania. She is the author of The Many Names for Mother, selected by Ellen Bass as the winner of the 2018 Stan and Tom Wick Poetry Prize, published through Kent State University Press. Her chapbook, The Bear Who Ate the Stars, was published in 2014. Her second collection, Don't Touch the Bones, won the 2019 Idaho Poetry Prize and was published by Lost Horse Press in March 2020. She is also part of the Chapbook Collective, and her newest collection, 40 Weeks, is forthcoming from YesYes Books next year in 2021. You can find her recent poetry in Poetry, American Poetry Review, and The Nation, among others. She lives in Philly with her 2 kids, 2 cats, 1 dog, and 1 husband. She edits Construction and occasionally writes Other Women Don't Tell You, a blog about motherhood. All right, Julia, take it away.
My son, of course, just woke up and came downstairs. So we'll see what happens. Thank you all so much for being here. Luisa, thank you for those incredible poems. Writing letters to you these last 3 days has been a salvation. And so I'm going to start with the letter to you. Dear Luisa, here is what I know for certain. The tulips are blooming. My son brings me their heads as gifts in cold spring sunlight. He doesn't understand my anger, how effortless he kills. We'll put them in a cup with water, he says. They'll drink and be alive. If only it were that simple. He screamed for an entire hour today, Luisa, because I didn't tell him the fairy tale he wanted. He kicked his bed and screamed. I confess I didn't have it in me to imagine anything beyond this moment, to invent adventures of Baba Yaga and the Snow Queen and him, the hero, Spider-Man most days. He didn't earn it, I said, a half-truth. On day 32 of countless stories, I woke wanting a day off from motherhood. He heard me crying downstairs and asked his father, why? You know why, he answered, and the guilt of every dead tulip on my counter bloomed inside my gut. I blame myself, Luisa, like we've been taught, from mother to mother. No matter what, someone's at fault. I wanted to run upstairs and tell him, it's not your fault, not your fault. How much we need to hear this. It's no one's fault. Here's what I know for certain, Luisa. My son's head will nearly leave his body to rest on mine. His sister's infant mouth will find my pink bud nipple effortless in any light. And while we're on new poems, I think I'll just read another new poem called Under the Supermoon, or Parenthood in Pandemic. So written last week under the supermoon and in our current situation. I'm only alone now when I walk the dog, that 4-block loop around our row home, and the moon is full and haloed pink because what animal, when alone, doesn't look up to the stars in wonder or hopeless wishing? And tonight, there are no stars, just ignited rock. A neighbor told my son she'd steal when he asked, are you a bad guy? And she responded, only at night. Oh, how we let ourselves be bad when we think no one's watching, when even light is uncertain, crescent glow between lonely and abandoned, and we are held by longing to be alone long enough to steal that moon. I realize now this poem's not true because I was just alone for like 3 hours going to Costco, and I called it a vacation. Also, there was a drive-through Starbucks where I got to get a drink and stay socially distant. It was amazing. My first latte in 5 weeks. So I'm going to read a few poems from The Many Names for Mother, and I'm going to read one that I don't think I've ever read since the book's been published, but it's about missing my mom because we can't see each other right now. It's called Diagnosis Takotsubo, and Takotsubo is the actual name for a broken heart syndrome, which is a real thing. You can actually apparently die of a broken heart. So Diagnosis Takotsubo. I'll die if you don't return, Mother tells me, like the beast to the girl in that old story, with the wilting flower and dying father. I'll die, she reminds me, almost daily, now that I'm already gone. But children never believe such things, that one day, sooner even than we realize, we won't have someone we can leave. I know, slowly, it's already happening. Her heart expanding into a fishing pot, an octopus trap, clay and rope submerged in seawater, sinking. They call it broken, but the muscle is far too strong. It grows, balloons, and stretches until the chest cannot contain it, until the skin is calm horizon, and the animal beneath breaks through the water, open-mouthed and not an animal anymore. And this is from a series of poems in the book called Other Women Don't Tell You that I started writing. I wrote the first one 9 months postpartum with my son, and I've kept writing them. So, and it's also, I guess, a longing for a shopping mall. The poem takes place in a shopping mall. I never thought I'd be like, wow, I really want to go to a shopping mall and be surrounded by all the crap that's at shopping malls. Other women don't tell you. It's a battle for the body, for every part of it. He's all you, some say. He has your eyes. And others, he has your hair. Look at those curls. And you let them twist around your fingers, vine tendrils, more plant than boy, more wild than will, more him than you. But it's a battle for ownership, for claiming the body you left him with as yours. And when you tell your mom he rode the escalator, repeating, whoa, in fascination at each descent away from the fluorescence, until the lights of Gucci and Versace drew him towards their dazzle, she says, he has good taste, then adds, you used to have taste too. So now you lack the parts you've given him. You're blind, chasing a toddler through the shopping mall. You're Tiresias, prophet, between earth and myth, God and man-like thing. You've given everything away to own these parts of him, the certainty that they are yours, or so they've told you. But you are eyeless and bald, and he is full of sight and mane and beautiful, and soon your mother says she won't know how to talk to you, but also that he doesn't have your eyes. Sorry. Oh, I missed my line. That he doesn't have your mouth. His nose, she adds, is undecided still, unclear if he will wear your history of bones, dead noses piling up, all yours, 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 and maybe not his. Maybe other women tell you he looks just like his dad, and you see it in his cheeks and jawline, in the flatness of his feet, the ankles caving in, and in the dips from waist to hind, as though some god or ghost has left their thumbprints to remind you how his body isn't yours at all. And I wasn't going to read this one, but Luisa talked about this, passing down of our Russian language. And that's something that I'm really working to do with my son. And when he was little, he still does. He had these really wonderful ways of translating Russian into English and wordplay. So this poem is called Dada Dada, and it's in anticipation of Earth Day next week. So a poem about how kids have this connection to nature just inherently. They're little, and then we kind of lose it as we get older. Dada Dada, my son calls any body of water. Man, Mr., Uncle Water, Uncle Sea, Uncle Ocean, Dada, not father, but close. Though we didn't teach him this, kinship, nature flowing into family, vast expanse into what is already inside him. Обними дядю вода, he says, and wraps his arms around the waves. Hug Uncle Water, and he falls flat onto the sand, palms wide and sinking as though into my body. Your kid is beautiful, a passerby says. Have more, have a whole litter. And if you have them close together, his cheek is in the sand, mouth full of salt. What's one more? Everything, I think, and want to hold him. But he is water, and no matter how wide I stretch my arms, I cannot hug or count, cannot contain the whole of him. And then I'm going to read 2 poems from the new book that's out in the world now, / just in my house, because it doesn't really get to be out in the world. And I want to read this one because there's an epigraph in this new book from Luisa, from her poem Cremation, in which she says, "If you wake up in a world of ashes, remember you have reached God in your own way." So this poem following hers is called Fire, Fire. Fire, fire, my son calls out, imagines flame, light shooting from his hands. Fire mountain, his hands. My boat is swimming through fire, always unscathed. My great-great-grandmother burned her whole right side when a vat of boiling Chernokorka, black rind, cherry preserves, spilled over her skirted thigh, ate right through the fabric. I imagine her hands swimming through fire, sugar, and pits, clearing skin of char. Her daughters would grow afraid of boiling, never bring red fruit to the stove again. Fire, fire, my son singes the air with open palms and asks if I see it. My great-grandfather must have burned too, though none of us saw those flames either. My boat, fire, fire, falling, fire. When our people's bodies rose too high, my mountain, fire. The Germans or Russians or Ukrainians, anyone without ashes in their blood, discovered burning always makes room for more. They named the dead a waste of space inside the earth, my ancestors a certain waste above it. But burned, we became fertilizer, compressed or blown away, lingering in soil and air, eternal and unnoticed, in my son's hands, fire, fire. And I'm just going to end with one last poem that's a prayer, a blessing, and it's called Phalanx Bone Shehianu, and Shehianu just means blessing. Praise these, your fingers, their tiny bones, each one a tooth, a needle, a loosening in reach, named for how far they grow away from you, for their distance from your other bones, from your body or mine, the one closest to your palm, proximal, phalanx, a surrender, a shield, the subsequent, a phalange, something I can't understand, like your pinky toe, too small to lodge inside my heart, but there it is, the smallest part of you, forever there, keeping time and beating. You laugh and push your whole foot into my mouth. How funny that it fits there so completely, that you love knowing it has a home inside. Then the middle bone and distal one, together they are everything your hands can hold and everything your feet may tread on. Together they are everything I'm made of, bone of my bone, blood of mine and not mine. Praise, praise these, your tiny bones. They are what God must have meant with every exhale. Thank you so much.
That was great. Thank you. So now if you guys want to have a discussion about each other's work or writing in this time or motherhood, feel free.
Who wants to go first? Luisa, I want to know, how has, since you always say like you don't sit down to write about motherhood.
Right.
How has this, these letters that we've been writing that kind of challenge you to sit down and write about your experience of motherhood, how has it been different in terms of composition process from your other poems?
Yeah. So they've been creeping in. Like before we even started the letter, it took me I don't know. I think I just had to if I have 4 or 5 more kids, it's going to be all mom poems. Okay. It's okay, fine. I'll write about all these children. No, I think, it takes me a long time to write, and it takes me, I'm a very slow writer. I don't think people realize that about me. And so it takes me a lot. So I have all these constant interactions with my kids, that sort of shatter me on a daily basis, both in incredible ways and then in incredibly, the emotional trajectory of a parent is, wide, I think, in a day. And so a lot of times I'll sort of fully process something that I want to sort of keep it and write about months later, and what's kind of forcing myself then to come to the page. We're trying to do this every night, and just let myself just write, just whatever happened today is going to go into the poem. And I think that's sort of forcing me to just, my children make up almost my entire day. So that's what I'm going to write about, versus well, that was really intense. I'm going to write about this in 6 or 7 years. Just you wait. Father years will get written about, So I think just the immediacy of the letter format has been really exciting and freeing. I feel like I'm able to just I do feel like I'm just talking to Julia, and that's been nice because, there's less, what does it really mean? And I'm well, he told me he loved pooping today, so I should probably address that. He's going to love these when he's older. So, Julia, what about you? How has the sort of letter form, and I'm curious too, when are you writing these at night? The kids are in bed? Is it nap time? When are you finding the time to, and I think it's a general question for mothers trying to write, especially, most of us are working plus full-time mothering, there's no I can't really see my parents right now, which was a big source of help for me. I don't know about you, but how's the writing going? I guess.
Well, I think that's what's been so exciting about these poems is that they're not usually written in one sitting. They're written in 12 sittings. Yeah. And so when I'm out with my son and he says something, that first poem that we wrote to each other that I didn't read because it's way too long and I feel like it's messy. But when my son was just in the park screaming, "Everybody, I love you. Everybody, can you hear me?" I was oh my God, I need this. The world needs to hear it. The world needs to hear this child wanting the love of strangers. And so I'm writing notes down, just stealing things that stealing gold that he's saying and that's happening. And then, so maybe I'll get a few lines and I'll then come back to them later. But I think that makes the poem so exciting because then they veer in so many different ways, both, veering into history and the way they just move makes them feel a lot less, I don't know, like you said, overthought, right? And planned. There's no real specific trajectory that it's going to go. It's such an adventure, which mimics the crazy process of parenthood.
Yeah.
That you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
In one day, you have your best moment, shortly thereafter followed by your absolute worst moment. Yeah. And then you make it through. You make it through knowing that there's always going to be a highlight and a low light. And some days that highlight is very, very slim, but other days the low light's very slim. So
definitely. Yeah, all the while, you have it in the back of your head, best days of your life. Appreciate it. You're going to be sad later. I feel like you hear that a lot. No, really appreciate this. Yeah. I agree with it. I certainly agree with it. But, you also just, I think the other day I was I just really want to, walk through a Target. Oh, I just want to walk through, just this, being quietly alone in public, I think is a pleasure of motherhood that I think most of us don't have right now in some ways. But I'm also a grocery store enthusiast, so I think people's greatest joy when they go like hiking, that's me going through a Costco, so I perhaps am different there.
I tried. Didn't you feel the joy vicariously?
I did.
Going through Costco.
Yeah.
But it was also for me heartbreak. Like my son really wanted to go with me. He's like, please, can I go to the store? I'm gonna wear my virus mask. and he tells people, he's like, oh, I can't get too close because of the virus. I'm saying it to him in Russian and they don't understand. I'm like, he means virus.
Yeah.
So it's also so sad because I want, to be able to take him on those lonely, beautifully lonely adventures.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, do you have a next project that you're working on? So American Radiance has been out now for a little while. What's next for the amazing Luisa?
So I've kind of got like multiple things happening. Obviously we started the letters, which is really cool. And then my other stuff is, I have two, like one I'm sort of working on that I started working when I was finishing up school. It's called Wild Dictionary, tentative title. It's probably going to change because seriously, dictionary, on the excitement scale. But it's me cataloging and going through kind of like mother tongue in that poem. That's one from that manuscript where I'm picking out language and words that like I was very connected to as I was learning English that don't necessarily like make sense. It's like I have a whole poem about Pepsi, which is what my grandfather called all beverages in English. Like he like very selectively learned English words. Like he's like, I don't need anything. I don't need to know a single other liquid. It's all Pepsi. And it worked for him many years. Like he's like, everybody just understood him. So it's like, I'm taking poems and really like, I told myself after American Radiance, I'm like, well, I think I'm going to try to like do less poems that are just so focused on us immigrating. And then like book 2 is like, oh, but more like, so book 2 was that, but more extreme, I think. I guess I'm not ready to shake that particular part of my life. So that's Wild Dictionary, and it's a lot of sort of poems of that nature. And then the other poems are kind of like stand-up based, like stand-up comedy based. I'm sort of interested in how many jokes can I fit into a poem, in a way that works. I'm just sort of letting myself do full, like dive into the pool of humor, because you always sort of, in my experience, at least in humor, you meet a lot of people that are like, they either like your funny poems or your sad poems. And I'm like, well, how do you tell the difference? Like mine are all kind of, they're the same. So I'm curious what those lines are. And, I've also sort of had people be like, well, like the funny poems are great, but like the serious ones, like the sad ones are like the more, like that's the ones that are going to get taken seriously. And I'm like, I disagree. I feel like usually my funniest poems, at least when I'm writing them, are typically based on the most traumatic event that I'm writing towards. It's kind of how I'm even able to get into the corridor of trauma personally. So that other book is just like literally the document is titled Stand Up on my desktop. And I think like literally the first poem is like, women like to shop. Like it's like really terrible. It's like the title, each poem is titled like a different, really awful, I don't trust, women, anything that bleeds for whatever days. And like, it's like the worst jokes you can think of in our culture. That's like the title of every different poem. And then we go from there. So those are my 2 projects. Julia, tell us about what you're working out. It's other than promoting this incredible book that I have actually yet to read, that I'm very excited to read.
But you're already epigraphed in it, so you're in here.
Yeah, I'm in it. No big deal. Do I get to cite that as a publication for me? Like, can I also?
Oh, yeah, I feel like you should.
I'm adjacent to this book, so hey, hiring committee, I've technically written 1.2 books.
I mean, I feel like we should just get hired to do one job and then we could just split it. Because I also started writing dictionary poems.
Yes!
But therefore, my dissertation chapter on Ilya Kaminsky, because, you know, he has that amazing poem in Dancing in Odessa about leaving all the dictionaries behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he has to redefine all the words. And so my dictionary poems are a little bit less, they're actually big, more abstract words where I say it in both English and Russian and look at the slippages between the etymologies of the words, and try and see, I don't know, what that does, what those slippages do.
Yeah.
But that's really just a dissertation chapter. I guess most of the stuff I've been writing lately fits into my third book, which is 40 Weeks, which is going to be out from YesYes in 2022. Maybe, who knows if it's going to be out in 2022. But it was written, you know, with Luisa, because we were together. When we were both pregnant. One of us was more pregnant than the other, but we were both pregnant at AWP, and it was so lovely.
Oh, yes.
And so I wrote a poem for each week of pregnancy with my daughter, titled by like the fruit or vegetable that your baby's size is compared to that week, and kind of play with the, you know, problematics of that, the way that that is gendering and objectifying, but also just what the heck was happening that week, because it was all about capturing the immediacy of motherhood, of going through pregnancy while trying to chase after, you know, my 3-year-old.
I really hope one of those week poems was just titled Breakfast at Denny's. I don't know if like what week the size of our breakfast at Denny's, because probably towards the end, because that was an enormous breakfast we enjoyed.
It was amazing. We just ate at Denny's and talked about Costco. I mean,
yeah,
that's pretty much the definition of our relationship. And really, we're now just going to put out a book of letter poems to each other. Yeah. I think that's what's going to happen.
Possibly sponsored by Costco.
And Denny's.
You can only buy 10 copies at a time. Sorry.
That would be great. I would love it. Every Jewish mother's fantasy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I think everything I've been writing loosely is kind of still a part of that manuscript, very much connected to the immediate moment of caring for craziness of 2 kids. And it might end up in the 40 weeks manuscript because, you know, you're pregnant for 40 weeks, but like that 40 weeks doesn't stop. It just keeps going. So who's to say when those 40 weeks are really over? My daughter's just now past her 40 weeks of, you know, life outside of the womb. So yeah, everything I've written until this point is still under, you know, 40 weeks postpartum. Yeah.
Yeah, I am interested because I've seen these sort of threads going around Twitter, like, how are you coping? You know, like, what are you doing to sort of keep yourself occupied, but also sort of emotionally healthy during this time? Because I'm always looking for, you know, ideas, and also, again, like trying to balance motherhood, writing. You know, I've done frozen yoga a lot. I'll be honest, this last couple weeks, and it's losing its charm.
So for me, I've done yoga twice, and I used to do it twice a week. I also teach, I teach fitness class for moms, and so I've been doing that twice a week from my computer, and that is like my 4-year-old's time on the Kindle. And I let that be that. I like really, for me emotionally, I need to be less hard on myself. And I'm sure you need to also, because that is our generational proclivity, is to be really hard on ourselves. Also, it's like really bad, but I'm coping by having a lot of wine. And by a lot, I don't mean quantity every night. I just mean I have never in my life been the type of person that like has a glass of wine or 2 every night. I have had a glass of wine every night since it began. Yeah. And I'm letting that be okay. That's fine. That's like what I need at the end of my day.
Yeah.
With wine and, some Netflix and chill time for an hour. But also poetry. Writing every day is something that's like, I don't have time for it. There's no time for it. And they're not good poems sometimes. Sometimes they're awful. They're not even poems. But just the insistence on doing it for me has been like a meditative kind of ritualistic practice that's made me feel connected to something beyond motherhood, like that more than mama thing. Even though being a mom full time is enough, it is more than enough. But I want to be in touch with that creative producing side. What about you, other than frozen yoga, obviously?
Yeah. It's a delight. It's a delight.
I've never done it. I really must.
I feel like you would be there's this lady that does it, like does all sorts, like there's a Star Wars one, there's a Trolls one, all sorts of options there if Frozen is not your thing. It's sort of like I have my moment, it's, I'm like, okay, I am gonna take like the sexiest 5-minute shower of all time. Like, I just really try to like pause when I do have like a moment, and like brushing my teeth, very exciting in the morning. Like that's all mom. Like, I mean, I do double cycles, and I think too, just trying to, I get outside as much as I possibly can. That really helps. I try to treat every facet of my home as a different like hotspot. I'm like, well, I'm gonna go downstairs for the basement, but that like switching like locations ever so slightly actually does a lot for me personally. But yeah, I would say I'm someone who, when I'm overwhelmingly stressed or just exhausted, writing can actually be hard for me because I just get really blocked up. I love to read when I'm like exhausted, so reading is fun. And I sort of like, I will put like books, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna get to you tonight. And like, it's just like, she's just like waiting for me, by my bed. Yeah, I've got Tracy Bramall's new book, and she is just waiting. Like, when mama gets done with these papers, I'm coming for you, and it's like this, it's like this nice little carrot at the end of the day. So I think I try to work in treats for myself. Like my son and I bake a lot together. It's like one of his favorite things to do. And then we just eat I'm like, we're going to make these cupcakes and then we're going to have 10 of them. And like that, and like, it's just fine. Like, I'm like, you can have as much sugar as you want, quarantine time, and I think that's sort of like I'm going to shower and get dressed every morning. That was like a day. And then now we're in, this is the land of wolves now,
Be kind to yourself, right? Be kind.
Yeah, I think that's sort of it. Like, I'm like, are we going to watch, Despicable Me twice in the same day? Hells yeah, we are. Like, I think I'm sort of fine with that. And like, and it's been kind of nice, like sort of trying to encourage my son, and it's hard. Obviously the babies can't do that, but like giving him space to like play on his own, I think has been good too. He's sort of getting better at that now where, and he's 3. So like, the other day I was trying to go to the bathroom and he like knocks on the door and he's like, mommy, like, I want to hang out. And I'm like, well, mommy needs some privacy. So he like opens the door, closes the door, comes, sits next to me. And he's like, well, I want to have privacy with you. And I was like, okay, fair enough. But it's like, they don't understand.
But he knocked on the door. You have an angel child.
Well, I mean,
closed doors. Here's my child. Like, are you, I don't understand.
But yeah, he's just, I just want to have privacy with you. And so I think like finding moments of privacy has been really great for parents. And again, especially, and I don't know, like, I don't know if it's like a little easier if you have older kids. It might be harder in a whole other series of ways. The most difficult thing my son has said to me so far is that he's bored, It's like, mommy, I'm bored. And he's like dramatic about it. And then we go play, Legos and he's fine 3 seconds later, So, I don't know what the challenges might be for like an older kid who maybe even absorbs more of the like global anxiety because they're more aware. The 7-month-old, he's great. He's just around 7 months old. He doesn't know. Mm-hmm. He started eating food.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There will be lots of covered in stuffed pictures. I can't wait.
Yeah, he's at that fun, like it's just entertaining to watch him eat or try to eat. It's great. And like the emotional like range a 7-month-old has trying to eat like a sweet potato is great. Like he's like pure joy, confusion, betrayal, all within like a 3-second time span. It's great.
It's the best. This morning, or was it yesterday morning? All mornings have blended into one long, never-ending morning. My son said to me, "Go back upstairs and sleep. Just go back up." He was with my husband, which is far kinder than something that he had said to me before. Which, you know, the worst thing my son's ever said to me is he said in Russian, "Я хочу, чтоб ты была мертвая."
Oh
Yeah,
no.
I want you to be dead. And then he went on, he said, "So that I can play with Papa." And I had to like really fight to just slam the door. "You want me gone?"
Yeah.
And then we had to talk through permanence and like understanding.
Yeah.
You know, you don't just want me to leave so you can play with
It doesn't work like that.
the primary caregiver, and you want time with the person that you're not with as often. But yeah, I think it's really interesting the way kids can be so magical and so hurtful and unintentionally so. And all they're trying to do is kind of express their own wants and needs.
Yeah.
But their wants and needs affect us on a whole other kind of emotional trajectory. And I'm trying to be very patient with him right now because I do like he goes to school. He really misses being in preschool with his friends. And, you know, he's demanding a lot out of me because I am, you know, meant to fulfill the role of teacher and every best friend and every book that he can't read and every toy that he can't play with right now.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to understand that he's going through an emotionally hard time too.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes left before it's been an hour. So before we wrap up, Luisa, you mentioned reading Tracy Vermaal's new book. Are there any other books that you guys are reading or things that you would recommend people reach out for right now? What books are you currently reading, or do you think people should read right now?
Okay, I will mention a few really fast. Thalia Hicks, I just finished Hoodwitch. I had sort of been coming back and forth to it, and it's incredible. Highly, highly recommend. Just absolutely stunning poems. Thalia is really a talented writer. And another book, I have not read it yet. I have only seen Katie read poems out of it, and I am very excited about it. But Praying Naked, Katie Condon, get you a copy. And here, I'm gonna let Julie go because I'm like, I had another one that I was just thinking of.
That's okay. Katie, I will second it. It's amazing. I read it in its earlier, I was lucky enough to read it in an earlier state. Tracy's new book, Monica Sook's new book, basically like all the books that just came out with Copper Canyon are so amazing. Ellen Bass's.
Maybe mommy will hear it. Okay. Okay, bring it here.
Time is up. Mama, your time is up.
Okay.
Ellen Bass's new Indigo is just really overwhelming. Kelly Grace Thomas. Hi, beautiful. Privetic. Privetic.
Say Privet.
Privet. I want our curly-haired children to meet at one point. You know, we both have very curly-haired boys that are just.
I'm that person.
That is a person, yes.
But I just have all of these books that I ordered that were like my AWP book fair. Like I can't wait to read Tina Chang's.
Right there.
No way. There's just so many. They're all over here, and I haven't read them. Just Gala's new Without Protection. There's so many. I just tons of books.
Okay. Well, we will add some of these into the links so that people can find them there. And thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
And people can tune in next week, same time, same place, to hear Edgar Coons and Tiana Clark. So we'll see.
Oh, amazing. Tiana and Edgar, also both great books.
Yes.
You guys are getting wonderful people.
Thank you.
Connor's book from Connor's fabulous.
Yeah.
You just awesome.
Well, thank you all, and good night.
All right, Louisa, I'm waiting for my next